Okay, there we go. And now I'm going to make you the host again, okay?
Okie dokes.
There we go.
So I'm going to wait another 2-3 minutes because it's not even 8 o'clock yet on my computer. In the meantime, I'm going to send a file. Our sources are basically just from the Megillah, but if you want to know kind of which pasuk I'm up to, hold on. Okay, I think we should get started. Okay. Those of you who are on time deserve that we start. Okay. Hi, my name is Shira Metzger. I'm here in Toronto in my little bubble of, Corona, not quarantine, but lockdown. So I haven't met any of you really in person. Okay, so first of all, I'd like to thank our sponsors for tonight, Irving and Michelle Jacobs. This shir is in loving memory of Celeste Masuda Jacobs, Chava Bat Rivka Chaya. Okay. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about tonight? So I basically went through the book of Esther, and I found that there are a lot of elements in it that we can kind of take as lessons for ourselves, for our own spiritual and emotional journeys in life, and kind of use as self-help tips. So I'm taking you guys along for the journey. So the first thing that kind of strikes me when I look at the Megillah is the shoresh, the root of the word katav. The root katav comes up a lot. And I kind of use that a little bit as a guide to help me figure out what's important for kind of going through a transformation in life. So basically writing, when you write something down, it has power, as we see in the Megillah, of course. The writing, and yes, including the ring's signature, but writing really has such an extreme power that it can't even be undone once something is written, right, and sealed. So there's something very powerful about writing, and I think it's it goes hand in hand with speaking also. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a jarring story that happened once that I witnessed. So I was at a Shabbos meal with a college Shabbos meal with a lot of young people who didn't know each other. So we decided to go around the table and do an icebreaker, right, to get to know each other. So someone suggested, let's do the icebreaker of what's your best scar story? It's weird, I know, but I guess the guys there really wanted to share their army scars. So, look at me, I got a bullet, down my shirt, and I have this cool mark on my stomach. Whatever. Anyway, that it was in Israel. So that was, that was the icebreaker. So anyway, one woman, a young woman, told a story which I think, I believe from my feeling of the situation and what went on there, I don't think she realized what she was saying until she said it. And that's important here for what I'm talking about in writing and also just expressing something. And until we express something or write it, it kind of has a different life. Once you write something down, you put it out for interpretation. And that's really the idea here of the Megillah being written down. And the reason why I can go and analyze the Megillah and say, I took this message from it. So I think Esther had this idea in mind, or not necessarily, but this is my interpretation and I have the right to do that because it's been written down. So anyway, she told a story basically about her. Apparently her mother had her when she was really young. Her mother was like 16 or 17 or something. And she took a knife and like heated it up and then put it on her skin. And she's like telling the story like it's a normal story. She's like, she was just curious to see what would happen. And the room went silent. Nobody knew how to react. And that was just a moment of someone kind of confessing something, putting something out in words. And the second it was like open up to interpretation of the room, of other people, I think she probably realized also that this was not a typical story. So that's just something that came to my mind when thinking about this. So writing has a lot of power, and we're going to use the shoresh of katav to take us through the story. So the first pasuk I bring down. So we're going to talk here about the personal growth process of different characters in the Megillah. So we're going to start with Achashverosh because he definitely goes through a really big process. So we're going to start with the pasuk Vayikatev b'datei paras u'madai v'lo ya'avor asher lo tavo vashti lifnei hamelech. Okay, the first principle, I come up with 5 kind of principles for self-help or for personal growth. Okay, so the first one that I'm gonna present here is recognizing the necessity for change and deciding to take action, which really are 2 separate things, recognizing and deciding. So this happens to Achashverosh, right? He recognizes there's a need for change. And in this pasuk Vayikatev, right, where it's written down that Vashti shouldn't come anymore before the king, right? That she's no longer his wife. That's where he decides to take action. He realizes that his kingdom is not working so well for him with Vashti, and she needs to go. Okay. Now, we have another person here who goes through a journey, and that's Esther, right? Now, Esther's story happens a little further on. Her story really starts with the pasuk, right? Ki'im hacharesh tacharishi, the climax, kind of climax, but it's also only the beginning of the story. When Mordechai says to her, "Listen, God's going to save the Jewish people if God wants to save the Jewish people. It doesn't necessarily have to be through you. But if you're going to be that messenger, if you're going to take that role, then you have to act now." Right? And this is the beginning of her story. And it's interesting because it's very much a personal story. It's not really about the Jewish people. It's really about her, right? Because what the idea that Mordechai is giving her is that, Hashem will find someone else, will find another messenger. But do you want to be that messenger, right? Do you want to take the potential that you've been given and use it? And then within the next few psukim, we learned 3 really important components in really facing any struggle from what Esther does. So let's look at the next pasuk. So the first thing is she says, Lech knos et kol hayudim vitsumu alai. Okay, what Esther does is she seeks support. Okay, so it's also support from Hashem, right? Because they're praying and they're fasting, and it's also support from the people. It's saying, people, I'm going through a struggle on your behalf. I need you. And that is the first kind of message I want to give over of, when we go through any kind of transformation, any kind of, process, really find your support, and that we definitely learned from Esther here, right? She that was the first thing that she did. The second thing, uvachen avo el hamelach asher lo kadat, v'chasher avadati. This is also a really, really important idea. She's willing to take a risk, right? When we want to go through any kind of transformation, anything that's really valuable and worthwhile, it's usually not going to be something so simple or so trivial, right? It's going to require possible risk, right? Possible negative outcomes. And you have to be willing to take that risk, because if you're not willing to take that risk, you're also not going to necessarily be able to get the benefit. And this statement of hers, right, again, as is, when you speak something, again, it makes it real, and it shows, what you're thinking and what your mindset is. So by saying this, she's deciding that here I'm taking a risk. I'm willing to risk, my own life for this purpose. Now, of course, in our own lives, it would be great if you guys could all just think in your mind of some kind of transformation you want to be going through, you're going through, and really try to apply it. Because if you have that example in your mind, it'll be really cool. So really being willing to take that risk doesn't always have to mean, really risking your life. But there's always something when we try something new that's at risk, even if it's our comfort zone, right? So that is definitely another thing we can learn from Esther. And the third is Vatilbash Esther Malchut. Okay. I think another very important message that she's giving here is she's dressing the part. I think even if she's not fully confident in herself that she really can, approach the king right now, that she's really worthy of it, she's putting on the makeup, the dress, and acting that way. So I'll give you an example from my life. So as you see my artwork in the background, it's hard for me to even say this, but I'm an artist, but I don't feel like an artist. I have, imposter syndrome. Like, I don't really feel like, come on, like, who, other people are better than me. I don't really know so much. I didn't study it, but I know that I am an artist, that I do art, I enjoy art, and I do create beautiful things. So telling you that I'm an artist is hard for me, but I'm still going to say it, because that's kind of like wearing the dress, right? It's, even if you're not so confident in it, put on the show, and then hopefully maybe it'll seep in a little bit. So that's the third thing that we can learn. Again, we're still in the first step, which was recognize the need for change and decide to take action. Okay, so that's really the first step for any kind of transformation or change, is really just recognizing it and making the decision that you're going to go for it, right? Like, we hear stories of people who have family members who, struggle with all different things, addictions. And you so badly want to help them, right? You want to, stick them in a facility, but unless they want to change, you can't change them. You really can't change another person. The real change has to come from within. And that's what's going on here with Esther, right? Like she's making the decision that she's going to act here. And that's the climax here. That's when her story can actually start. Okay. The next idea comes from, again, it has the Shorish Katav in it, and it's Veikatev Kachol Asher Tziva Haman Lashmid Larog Labed Kol HaYehudim. So we're talking again about Achashverosh's journey here, right? He's got, some things messed up in his kingdom, and he wants to make it better, in his view, better. And he has this great advisor, his best advisor even, who tells him that there are these people, these Jewish people, and they're his problem. If he just wiped them out, everything will be good. So even though, for us, this isn't a good move, for Achashverosh in his quest to, better his kingdom, this is a good decision towards, bettering his kingdom. Again, his best advisor said so it must be true, right? So again, it's this writing down and this deciding, we're going to do it. We're going to kill all the Jewish people. Then everything will be good. But what I want to focus on here specifically is understanding that it's going to be a process, right? Like getting rid of Vashti is just the first step, right? Wiping out a whole people, again, it's a really bad thing. I don't think it's a good thing. But wiping out a whole people is going to be a process. It's going to take time, right? And that's something that he had to recognize, that it's a slow and gradual process. Now for the Jewish people also, for Esther also, it was a slow and gradual process where we see her patience when she waits for, she has a first meeting with Haman and Achashverosh, and then she, has another one. She waits. She doesn't, just blurt it out right away because she wants it to have the right impact at the right time. But as opposed to kind of the Haman and Achashverosh view, we see the total opposite with the Jewish people. It's written LeYehudim hayta orav v'simcha v'sason b'ikar. And if you look at the placement of that pasuk, you'll see that actually comes in before the victory, before the story of the victory, against the enemies of the Jewish people. It already says the Jews, were rejoicing and they were happy. And that is another kind of lesson that we could learn, is to appreciate every one of the small steps on the way, right? There is, a bigger goal, right? So wipe out all our enemies, let's say, in this case, right? But in getting there are a lot of steps. And if we can appreciate every little step along the way, and here, of course, they're thanking Hashem. It's a very helpful kind of way of looking at things. Now, we're in a pandemic, and I know like it feels heavy. It feels like, the whole world is over, and the whole, but look at, if you can focus on the small things, on the small achievements, on the fact that, we have more family time now, or, the fact that the vaccine exists and slowly, I know in Canada it's really, really slow, but, maybe one day, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But every time there is a positive kind of movement forwards, to appreciate that step, because nothing that's meaningful and that will last happens, overnight. So I think that's very important. The placement of this pasuk where it says that the Jewish people rejoiced, really before their victory really was won. Okay, so that was our second point, which is accepting that it's a process. Okay, it's a slow process, and appreciating the small victories along the way. Okay. Now the next step, which is really the most important and most difficult work that we do, is knowing your inner voices and just trying to understand, what goes on in your head, right? So let's start with Achashverosh. Achashverosh is very confused. Okay, so it's not in his head, but it's, we'll take it as representative of what's in our head. But for Achashverosh, he has two voices, right? He has Haman and he has Mordechai. And they're both, telling him things. And I skipped this passage. So let's just go back for a second. Okay, so he can't sleep, right? Because of these conflicting kind of ideas, from Mordechai and from Haman, and who's right and what should I do? And he can't sleep, and he asks for his book of memories to be brought to him. So first of all, I can compare this again. I'm sure this is not what it was used for, but a plug here for a great self-help activity is to have a gratitude journal. And it's basically kind of what he had there, right? Like someone did something really nice to him and he wrote it down. And again, if we're talking about the power of the written word and the power of the spoken word, then what a gratitude journal does is it forces you, to focus on what you're grateful for every day. And it's a tip that's given if someone's just seeking, more happiness in life, just want to be happier, right? Like, especially someone who has, a good life and all the elements for, happiness, and doesn't feel happy. Having a gratitude journal really can help towards that, right? Just be thankful, voice it, right? And once you voice it or write it, then it kind of makes it real, brings it to life, and makes you kind of realize what it is that you do have. So that's definitely a great practice that I recommend for everyone, especially during pandemic, when it's a little harder to remember all the things that we're grateful for. So he wrote down, this gratitude that he owed to another person. Anyway, so he's having his own personal conflicts. So now let's talk a little bit about the difference of Haman and Mordechai's kind of like the mindsets, I would say, that they each represent. So let's take a pasuk that describes Haman's mindset, and that's him saying, "V'chol ze eino shoveli b'chol et asher ani ro'et Mordechai Yehudi yoshev b'shar hamelech." Okay, Haman is literally honored by the entire kingdom, like everyone except like one man, and maybe the few other people who followed Mordechai, right? Like, other than that, you think of politicians, right? Like, they can be liked by a lot of people. There's always going to be someone who doesn't like them, right? But Haman couldn't stand it. He could not live with himself if there existed a human being who didn't bow down to him. Like, what is this? I need to be loved by every single human being in the world. How can he dare not bow down to me, right? And that kind of reflects a very black and white kind of thought process, which tends to be less healthy and less productive for us. Very perfectionistic, like I need to have it all, or it's all worth nothing. And that's kind of the Haman point of view that we see here. On the other hand, I'll bring a pasuk here that describes Mordechai. It says, "Ki Mordechai Yehudi mishneh lemelech Achashverosh, v'gadol Yehudim v'ratzui lerov echav, doresh tov le'amo v'dover shalom l'chol zarav." And the word rov here is bolded. It says that Mordechai was really, really, really liked by most of the Jewish people. It literally says the word most, not all, right? Because you can't get all, and that's okay. And that's kind of the message of Mordechai. It's kind of the healthier mindset and the healthier perspective of, I'm not going to have it all, and that's okay. Right? Appreciating all the gray that's in the middle, right? Especially since he's closer to the he has a lot. He has most of the people's approval and support. Not all, but that's okay, and he's able to appreciate that. So that's kind of these are examples that I bring to kind of show kind of different understandings of our mindsets. And that's what I said here in the third principle: know your inner voices and conflicts, right? Like, recognize them, learn them, understand yourself when, let's say, you're really frustrated with yourself because something didn't turn out so well, and then you realize, like, I'm really actually just being hard on myself for no reason, because I'm employing black and white thinking, and that's not necessarily so good for me. So maybe maybe that's not, that maybe I shouldn't be using that thought process. Okay, so that's really the knowledge. So we talked about recognizing a need for change, deciding to take action, accepting that it's a process, and appreciating the small victories. And now kind of learning a little bit about your mind, right? And your inner voices and conflicts. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about uncovering masks. And uncovering the masks of the Yetzer Hara and Yetzer HaTov. You can, phrase it however you want. This is the Jewish way of phrasing it. But the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov, sometimes they're really masked, right? It's not always so clear who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, right? What's the good voice and what's the bad voice? Like, if you just think of the word perfection, right, as perfectionism, like, you actually think that's a good thing, right? Like, shouldn't we all strive for perfection, right? And until you experience, being a perfectionist or, seeing the negative aspects that it has, you might not even realize that your tendency towards perfection is actually not helping you. So here's really trying to uncover and figure out who's which player. And that's what Achashverosh goes through, right? Like, he suddenly realizes, it's brought to his attention through Esther, that this good guy, right? This good guy Haman is actually not the good guy. He's actually the bad guy. And that takes like a whole, it's crazy. He has to like realize that, right? Like, we have to realize, I'm using perfection as an example because it was in the last one. But, if we think, my desire to be perfect is what, will get me to greatness, maybe it's not actually true, right? And so the fourth principle here is really kind of figuring out who's really the Yetzer Hara and who's really the Yetzer Tov. So here, of course, becomes, the legal problem where Achashverosh has to figure out, how to unwrite something that's already been written, right? It's already been written that the Jews can be killed on the 14th of Adar, and now it needs to be kind of a new formulation needs to be written. Okay, so now I just have to share a video that I think just kind of illustrates this very well. So let's hope that I can do that. Yes, here we go. Okay.
Rapunzel, what's going on up there? Are you all right?
I'm a lost princess.
Oh, please speak up, Rapunzel. You know how I hate the mumbling.
I am the lost princess, aren't I? Did I mumble, Mother? Or should I even call you that?
Rapunzel, do you even hear yourself? Why would you ask such a ridiculous question?
It was you! It was all you!
Everything I did was to protect you. Rapunzel,
I've spent my entire life hiding from people who would use me for my power.
Rapunzel!
When I should have been hiding from you.
Where will you go? He won't be there for you.
What did you do to him?
That criminal is to be hanged for his crimes. No, it's all right. Listen to me. All of this is as it should be.
No! You were wrong about the world. And you were wrong about me. And I will never let you use my hair again!
Okay, so, I'm assuming you're all familiar with the story of Rapunzel, whether or not you watched Tangled. But I think it's such a powerful kind of image in this story, what happens, because she grows up in this house with a woman who she doesn't know for the first, many years of her life. She doesn't know that this woman is a witch who kidnapped her, basically, and wants her for her powers, right? For the powers that her hair has. She doesn't know that. And she grows up thinking that this mother is keeping her in this tower away from the rest of the world because the rest of the world is bad for her, right? And that's kind of what she learns, what she grows up with. That's the idea. And this moment that I just showed, from the movie, is a moment where she suddenly realizes that her mother isn't actually her mother. That this person who was, who she thinks or she grew up thinking was protecting her, actually isn't. That's not the good guy. That's actually really the bad guy. And once she's, she makes that switch, she's able to, to change and to run away from, the bad guy and, live happily ever after, as all these, stories go. But this is something that we see also. I forgot to mention in the beginning that I'm a life coach. So this is something that I that's kind of the theme here. A lot of times we have certain thought processes or certain, what's the word, like coping mechanisms that really did once serve us, that once really were good for us. So for example, I work with someone who was hurt by a lot of friends. A lot of, people weren't nice to her, growing up, and she learned to kind of put up a little bit of a, a wall and not let people in. And that actually really served her well, because by not letting people in, she really was more protected. Like she didn't get hurt as much. And now that she's in a much better place and she's, more mature now, she's trying to learn how to kind of get rid of that wall, because that protection, which really once was good for her, suddenly isn't. So it's not as simple as, someone, your mother not really being your mother, really being a witch, but it can really be something that once really served us and really did protect us, but is no longer, helpful to us anymore. So what we do, just to share a little bit, what we do in that case is we talk to that emotion and that coping mechanism, and we say, thank you for serving me. Thank you for what you've done for me and for keeping me protected, when I needed you. But now I'm past that. Now I'm saying goodbye to you. I don't need that protective wall anymore, because it's hurting me more than it's helping me. So that's kind of, the idea here, again, with understanding that Haman's not the good guy. Right? And Achashverosh had to go through a process to understand that, or, maybe forced upon him. But until he understood that, he was, almost killing all the Jewish people. So that's another kind of message that I really want to bring forth here. The importance of not just understanding our mindsets or, what goes on in our heads, but also really trying to understand who's the good guy and who's the bad guy. And just because someone was once the good guy doesn't mean he's still the good guy. Okay. Now let's get to the last point here. Okay, and the last point is kind of also the point that I started with, and that's the idea of writing things down. So we see that both Vayichtov Mordechai et hadvarim ha'eleh v'yishlach sfarim el kol Yehudim v'kiblu Yehudim et asher katav Mordechai alehem. And also, v'tichtov Esther Malka et kol tokef v'tishlach sfarim el kol Yehudim divrei shalom v'emet. Right? Both Mordechai and Esther write their story. Right? Like, why is it important for the Tanakh to tell us that? Right? Like, it's written, we have it. Right? Why do we have to know that they wrote it? I think it's kind of teaching us the message of the importance. There's a lot of importance that comes with writing, as I spoke about a little bit in the beginning, about how, writing something kind of makes it real. Makes it open to interpretation for other people, for ourselves even, to view it in a way through other people's lenses. You can also rewrite your story. There are all these cool kind of like, therapies and stuff where, bibliotherapy, where you're like telling your story again, and once you're rewriting your story, you can change the past. You could change your kind of perspective on it, and how it affects you. And the idea here is kind of, all the benefits of writing, right? Like sharing their story. And that's what they did, right? what Mordecai and Esther went through here. They chose to share it. They chose to inspire others with, what they went through. And they seek support, right? Which again, we talked about, a little bit in the beginning when Esther asked for the Jewish people to, pray and fast on her behalf. That was her seeking support. And here again, writing down the story is a reach outwards. And an important point here also is that you don't have to, share your story with everyone. Here they did. We're talking about, a Jewish story and a story that made it into Tanakh, and it's obviously important for the Jewish people. But you can choose one or two people to share with also, and that's often fine, right? It doesn't have to be, all over social media and to the whole world, right? You choose your people who you already know will, respond in a way that's good for you, that's healthy for you. And that's it. That's kind of, the five keys. So let's just go over them once more. The 5 kind of keys for self-help. So we talked about recognizing the need for change and deciding to take action. We saw how Esther both seeked support, was willing to take a risk, and knew her worth, right, in the way that she dressed. The second idea is accepting that it's a process. And within that is also appreciating the small victories along the way. The third idea is knowing yourself, right? Knowing your voices, knowing your conflicts, knowing just what goes on in your head. The fourth is trying to figure out, who's the good guy and who's the bad guy, like what's helping me and what's keeping me back. Even if, it once helped me, maybe today it's not helpful to me anymore. And the idea of sharing and the importance of sharing with other people, and just the importance of writing in general. And of course, we could talk about gratitude journals too, because, Ahasuerus had one, and it served the Jewish people well. So hopefully it'll serve us well too. That's it for what I have to share. If anyone has anything to add, to share, any questions, go ahead.
Hi, I just want to say your idea of writing, the theme of writing throughout really resonated with me. And what I really particularly like is the first time that Haman wrote the decree, it was to, it was that the Jews should be attacked, right? Whereas the second one was essentially that the Jews could defend themselves or reattack, whatever. So I think that also fits very nicely with your theme, because sometimes as we feel attacked, we can rewrite that story. We can, even if it's in the future, like this one was, right? We see something coming at us, but we have the power to rewrite it in a different way than what we anticipate might happen.
Right, and also along that line, the fact that, you really can't change the history, right? You can't change what happened. And that's the same issue here. Like you can't undo a decree, right? If the king, stamped it, you can't undo it. So, but you can, in some way through writing and through, revisiting.
You have the agency, and I love that. Thank you. It was all beautiful, but this was an idea I loved particularly.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, so does someone want to?
Thank you very much.
Okay, my pleasure. Anyway, have a good night, everyone, and nice to meet you, at least, sort of virtually. And hopefully one day soon I'll get to meet you guys in person.
Thank you, Shira.
Thank you.
Very nice idea, Shira, and very well presented. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.